Durdle Door is a natural limestone arch on the Jurassic Coast near Lulworth in Dorset, England. It is privately owned by the Welds, a family who owns 12,000 acres in Dorset in the name of the Lulworth Estate. It is open to the public. The name Durdle is derived from the Old English thirl meaning bore or drill. Geology: the form of the coastline around Durdle Door is controlled by its geology, both by the contrasting hardnesses of the rocks, and by the local patterns of faults and folds. The arch is formed on a concordant coastline where bands of rock run parallel to the shoreline. The rock strata are almost vertical, and the bands of rock are quite narrow. Originally a band of resistant Portland limestone ran along the shore, the same band that appears 1 mile along the coast forming the narrow entrance to Lulworth Cove. Behind this is a 120-metre band of weaker, easily eroded rocks, and behind this is a stronger and much thicker band of chalk, which forms the Purbeck Hills. These steeply dipping rocks are part of the geological structure known as the Lulworth Crumple, itself part of a broader monocline produced by the building of the Alps during the mid-Cenozoic. The limestone and chalk are in closer proximity at Durdle Door than at Swanage, 10 miles to the east, where the distance is over 2 miles. There are at least 3 reasons for this. Firstly, the beds are highly inclined. Secondly, some of the beds have been cut out by faulting. And thirdly, the area around Durdle Door seems to have had shallower water at the time of deposition than comparable geological sections, so thinner bands of sediments were deposited. Around this part of the coast nearly all of the limestone has been removed by sea erosion, whilst the remainder forms the small headland which includes the arch. Erosion at the western end of the limestone band has resulted in the arch formation. UNESCO teams monitor the condition of both the arch and adjacent beach. The 120-metre isthmus which joins the limestone to the chalk is made of a 50-metre band of Portland limestone, a narrow and compressed band of Cretaceous Wealden clays and sands, and then narrow bands of Grian sand and sandstone. In Man-o'-War Bay, the small bay immediately east of Durdle Door, the band of Portland and Purbeck limestone has not been entirely eroded away, and is visible above the waves as Man-o'-War rocks. Similarly, offshore to the west, the eroded limestone outcrop forms a line of small rocky islets called the Bull, the Blind Cow, and the Calf. As the coastline in this area is generally an eroding landscape, the cliffs are subject to occasional rockfalls and landslides. A particularly large slide occurred just to the east of Durdle Door in April 2013, resulting in destruction of part of the southwest coast path. Etymology: there is a dearth of early written records about the arch, though it has kept a name given to it probably over 1,000 years ago. In the late 18th century there is a description of the magnificent arch of Durdle Rock Door, and early 19th century maps called it Durdle Dor and Durdle or Durdle Dor. In 1811 the first Ordnance Survey map of the area named it as Durdle Dor. Durdle is derived from the Old English thirl, meaning to pierce, bore or drill, which in turn derives from thirl, meaning hole. Similar names in the region include Durlston Bay and Durlston Head further east, where a coastal stack suggests the existence of an earlier arch, and the Thirlstone, an arched rock in the neighbouring county of Devon to the west. The Dor part of the name probably maintains its modern meaning, referring to the arched shape of the rock. In the late 19th century there is reference to it being called the Bun Door, and is described as being sufficiently high for a good-sized sailing boat to pass through it. In literature and popular culture, music videos have been filmed at Durdle Door, including parts of Tears for Fears Shout and Cliff Richard's Saviour's Day. The landscape around Durdle Door has been used in scenes in several films, including Wild starring Stephen Ferry, Nanny McPhee starring Emma Thompson, and the 1967 production of Far From the Madding Crowd. Ron Dawson's children's story Scary Bones Meets the Dinosaurs of the Jurassic Coast creates a myth of how Durdle Door came to be, as an undiscovered dinosaur called Durdle Dor is magically transformed into rock. Dorset-born Arthur Mole, a friend of Thomas Hardy and missionary to China, wrote these lines about Durdle Door for his 1879 book of poetry Songs of Heaven and Home, written in a foreign land: "Shall the tide thus ebb and flow forever? And forevermore? Rave the wave and glance the ripple through the rocks at Durdle Door? See also, Stair Hole, List of Dorset beaches, list of places on the Jurassic Coast, geology of Dorset, Swire Head, Chaldon Down and Bats Head, to the west, Durdle Pier, Isle of Portland, Delicate Arch and Landscape Arch in the USA, Rocher Perker Copyright, Quay Copyright Beck, Canada, references. Further reading, Arkell, W.J., 1978. The Geology of the Country Around Weymouth, Swanage, Corfe and Lulworth, 4th Pier London, Geological Survey of Great Britain, HMSO. Davis, G.M., 1956. A Geological Guide to the Dorset Coast, 2nd ed. London, Adam and Charles Black. Perkins, J.W., 1977. Geology Explained in Dorset. London, David and Charles. External links, FLICKR, photos tagged with Durdle Door, Caves, Arches and Stacks Southwest Coastal Group, Durdle Door, Past and Future Animation, section of Lulworth Crumple, labeled Diagram by Ian West, Durdle Door Educational Activity Sheet for Kids at Easy Science for Kids.